Hey people, I'm going to show you how I research and how I crack the case of the Wall of the Crow. This is an ancient wall in Egypt. If you look through this hole here, you're looking at the Great Pyramid. It's a massive ancient stone wall that stands a few hundred yards south of the Sphinx. Because it lay partially buried, overshadowed by the larger, more famous Great Pyramid Sphinx and other pyramids, tourists have already hardly noticed it. And known locally as the Wall of the Crow. It's 200 meters long, 10 meters high, and 10 meters thick. The wall is northwest border of a tract of low desert that we designated Area A. So this is turned wrong. This is west on the top, but this is the Wall of the Crow here, and it runs east-west. This is east at the bottom, and so that hole, the scuttle through it's looking up this way toward the Sphinx. So they think it was built in the 3rd or 4th dynasty in Egypt, and it's got the huge stones on it. And this is an ancient artist's rendition. I think back in 1800 somebody drew this, but it's some big old blocks up there. It looks like more than what a train car could carry. Probably 80,000 tons. So I've been on a chimney a couple of days. I'm pretty stove up. So I come home last night and I got to thinking about Vikings, and so I put Viking, V-I-K-I-N, in my search on this old Paleo Torah, and it only covers the first 5 books. I saw it come up 3 times here. In the beginning of 25, Genesis 43:25, and then in 46, and then in Exodus 6, and it's surrounded by the same words in these last 2. So I come over here to Bible Hub where I could search the whole Bible for these words, and I have all the punctuation so I can get a better reading on this. And I can see that their interpretations, and that adds a clue. But this is the Viking, V-I-K-I-N, and then Vav, what to, W-T-A, reads backwards. The Viking, what to, then the hyphen has me read this backwards. Each name, Menhi, add of bow, power or knowledge connected is of. If I'm telling you something about a cat, I'm talking of the cat. The knowledge connected, and then the bow. This is more bow, as in into power. The front of a ship, the bow of a ship is going be in to power. It's on the bow, and so on the each name, many add of bow. And the Vikings, that was the Macs. All of them, their name starts with Mac, McInerney. Irish and Scottish, all their names start with Mac. Each name, many add of bow. Just P. And I found one place where it explains this. And what it means is, everything has different meanings depending on where it's used, but it's just P, and so when it's backwards here, it's PSU. And so in the spot I found it had a tack in front of it, and so it was talking about the name of Pishu, PSU, Pishu, just P. Changing Pishu to just P. And like I say, Pishu was the name of the ruler of Babylon in the old Czech writings. And it's also known as the bite or the sting, the Pishu. And that was also an ancient word for a cat. And I've seen it was used by old French writers talking about ancient cats in Africa, but also in the American languages too. And you can see here in Iran that the dog was also called the Pishu. Means we'll bite you. And then in X, in cross the rise at noon, in cross the rise. To give some to. Chemiss, K-I-M-S-S. To give some to chemiss. Jackal to. Anything with an A-K-L, they say, is eat, but I believe this is the eat when it starts with the J, the jackal. The chemist, jackal to loss. This isn't bread. This is only bread when it comes after attack. And then it's M-H-L-H-M, to meal him. With the jackal to meal him. But without the tack, it's just the jackal to loss. L-H-S. And so L, of, H is divide, and M is from. Of to divide from, is to less. But I can click on this word here, and it'll bring me to where this word comes up like this 5 times, and it possibly comes up many other times, and they'll give it a different meaning, or sometimes the same meaning. They just won't put it in the same category. And I saw it come up in Chronicles, and it's invite. This was easy to read. B-V-I-T, to invite you, the Viking, to the house of the Lord prepared. Invite is what this is. This usually means to come in, invite you. And so I went to look at that, and it says, to yammer, to make the word, to yammer. This is usually when it just means, and he said, most of the time. And to yammer, I-H-Z, each is few to, each is few, Q-I-E-W. And said, each is few, lichen, lichen, L-E-K-I-N, of the kin. Your kin, y'all kind of look alike. We could tell what family you come from because you have the lichen. Of Scott, S-K-U-T. Invite you, Viking to. And yeah, the Scottish were they were the Vikings, and this is the old spelling of the Scot, one of them, S-K-U-T, the Scot. And so I thought I'd check that word out and see where all it comes up, because I know it comes up in the Greek in the beginning of Genesis, and it's called the shade, the color. And so I see it come up, 5 times. This is where I'm reading. And then in Ezekiel 40, twice in one line, and then 42, and is given the meaning of chambers. But I notice here that it's followed by the AL here. Survive souls is of scuttle, and a scuttle is scuttle's a small hatch or opening in a boat, also a small opening in a boat or ship for draining water from the main deck. After you pick all your shrimp out, you wash all the trash out the side of the scuttle. And sometimes they'll have a rubber flap to keep it from running down the side and staying in your boat. Or if you're just in rough seas and water's coming over the side, it gives a place for the water to drain off the deck. But I notice in Ezekiel 42:10, it's not followed by the AL. And it says to place the bin in of scut. I went to look at that. And it's talking about in the thickness of the wall of the court toward the east, over against opposite the separating courtyard, and opposite the building also there were chambers. To place the bin in of scut. But when you get old, your knees and back go out, but your mind starts working better, and you dump your nets off in this trough, and you just rake all your good shrimp through a scuttle to the bin on the deck. And when you finish getting all the good out, you just rake the trash out the ends of the scuttle. That's where this definition comes from, scut. A person perceived as foolish, contemptible, or objectionable. Go away, you dirty little scut. Just push the dirt out the scuttle. Of unknown origin. Everything that comes from the Hebrew, that's what they'll say about it. It was a widely used term back in 1800s, and it's kind of going away here. So they interpret this as in the thickness of the wall of the court toward the east. But this is breach, B-R-C-H, B-R-C-H, and then the B again without the dot, so it's a V, or means in. And it's the breach in. And then hits the wall and reads backwards, and it's V-H-R, and then in. The breach in veerin. Breach is failing to observe the law, or a gap in a wall, barrier, or defense, especially one made by an attacking army. And the veer, is to change direction. And so the breach in veerin, God reach, God, G-D-R-E-C-H-X-R. God reaches first. Direct the feed, F-D-I-S. Direct the feed is, the breach in the wall that God reaches first. Direct toward. Direct the feed is. The feed is the east because all the stars, everything feeds up from the east. We watch the moon and the sun and the stars all rise from the east, from the feed is. Lane, L-A-I-N, lane in P-N-I, ping is a place. To lane in place. The geyser. Geyser means old. It's where Giza come from, the word Giza. That nobody ever called it Egypt before. It was called Chemis and the Giza Plateau, the old plateau. The Geyser wall, W-A-L. And this is a wall to the powers bind. Vav, connect, A, power, L, bind. To bind something up, build a wall around it. The geyser, the ancient wall, and then backwards and forwards again, in place, the bin in of scut. In the place, the bin in of scut. So if you look at this on Google Earth, the Nile starts way back over here somewhere in these lakes up on these mountains, and it runs on down. And everything about it tells me, there was much more water, and it filled all this up before. And so this was the plateau up here. This was the dry area. This is all wet. It's, not always wet. Sometimes it flooded higher than others. And there's markings all throughout Egypt that tells water levels. But this is where that wall was. A big high point here. And so that would be the scuttle. This little hole through the walls, the scuttle, where they would direct everything, direct all the traffic coming in. And they would first direct by the Sphinx. Pishu is another word for a cat. The ancient cat was Pishu. But it sits here. It was sitting right here on the river bank. All the ships coming in. They would first go to the bank, to the exchange, and they had exchange rates posted out here for all the traffic, so everybody knew what money was worth what in your exchange. And the cat, the Pishu, sits on the bank, on the river bank, at the exchange. And so they direct the traffic through the scuttle where they want them to go. So the breach veering, God reaches first. Direct the feed is. So the feed isn't necessarily east, but the feed is coming from down the river. It's from the south on right here. The feed. The feed is lay in place the geyser wall. In place haben in. The building is the habitat, the haben in of scut. And so this SK, is shack in the succubus, when he lies with, that's the SK in there, the shack in of Shakwut, the habitant of Shakwut, where the god habits of Shakin, the Sphinx. Who kin to, the Viking. The Viking, what to each name many, add of bow, to make to spin, S-P-B-I-N, B means in, S-P-I-N-X, to make to the Sphinx. Here is the key. Some to give, some to chemist, the jackal to less. The jackal to less. As all the names in the Bible have a meaning, and you see them close by wherever that name comes up. She called his name Joseph and said, shall add. It's just JSP here, where Joseph is J-U-S-P. But if you look at this word, it'll give you all of them in the category. And you'll find the exact same word as Joseph used. Here it's the same word as and Joseph. Means to increase, to add. And Joseph add that 7% sales tax. You can see here it's the same word they say means and Joseph. And so Joseph isn't the Sphinx. It's just a letter combination, J-U-S-P. And so and made ready the gift for the arrival. Here's the Sphinx, and he's the tax collector. If you coming into to Giza and you come into trade there, we only trade with our money, and you go through the exchange. You go through the Sphinx and exchange your money, and so everything can get properly taxed. He's the tax collector here. He's the jackal to less. The final M pronounces an S to bind, divide from. What you less. He's taking his 7% sales tax. And so, it's not joke, but this is just a letter combination. And so it can mean different things. And you can see it in this word they say is, and you shall count, is and spirits, S-P-R-T-S. And in the word in book this is in spear these, encipher these, write them down. The cut of, encipher these. You can see it in this word for money, in the cusp, K-S-P. Pieces of silver. Money. And you can see here in 4811 it's and said, and Yammer, his rule lapse, L-A, and then with a tack it reads backwards and forwards. The lapse who, Vi. The lapse who, to spear panic. To spear panic. And his rule lapse who, to spear panic. And so this word Viking, is here with the lichen. And said, each is few lichen of scut. Invite you. The Viking is VY is Y, an ancient word that means why or who. Invite you who kin to, who's of your kin. And that was your kin, the Scottish and the Egyptians and the Vikings, they all wore a kilt. And said, make his few lichen of Scot invite you who kin to, the Viking who kin to. And so that's a better definition of what kin means, Viking. And they were of the kin of your kin. So the book's in ancient English, and it was the language of the Vikings and of the Scottish and of the Irish, and the Scots were of the kin of the Scots, or the kin of the Irish. Irish is where your word Jerusalem come from. IRSH is the spelling of it. But I haven't read these chapters yet. I just ran into this and thought I would share it. And I'm fixing to read this chapters 40, 41, and 42. And I'm sure I'll find out a bunch of information that they're having a hard time digging up over there in Geezer. Alright, I'm going to cut this off here. Good day.